What if one of the most important decisions of Queen Elizabeth II's early reign quietly changed Prince Philip's place inside his own family forever? Just weeks after Elizabeth became queen, a formal decision was made that placed her children under the Windsor family name rather than Philip's. For a man who had already surrendered his royal titles, nationality, religion, and military career to marry her, the decision reportedly cut especially deep. Yet he remained beside Elizabeth for decades. In this video, we'll uncover the story behind that decision and the sacrifices Philip carried throughout his life. Before we continue, subscribe for more untold royal stories. The popular version of Elizabeth and Philip's marriage often focuses on romance. Two young people who met before the Second World War, stayed connected through letters, married in 1947, and remained together for more than 7 decades. But beneath that familiar story was a complicated arrangement of duty, identity, family expectations, and sacrifice. Philip entered the marriage without the security that Elizabeth already possessed. He had been born a prince, yet his childhood had been marked by upheaval, separation, and uncertainty. By the time he married Elizabeth, much of the life he had once known had already disappeared. Philip's family history helps explain why his identity mattered so much to him. His father, Prince Andrew of Greece and Denmark, died while Philip was still a young man, leaving him with very little material inheritance. Among the belongings associated with his father was a signet ring that Philip reportedly kept throughout his life. That small object represented something different from everything else around him. It came from his own family rather than from the institution he married into. Philip would eventually spend decades surrounded by royal possessions, palaces, ceremonies, and traditions, but the ring remained a personal connection to the family identity he had surrendered. Philip's early life had already exposed him to extraordinary loss. His mother, Princess Alice, experienced serious personal difficulties, while his sisters married into German families. One of the most traumatic moments came when his sister Cecily died in an aircraft accident along with members of her family. Philip attended the funeral in Germany as a teenager. The experience followed him into adulthood, especially because of the political atmosphere surrounding some members of his extended family. When his relationship with Elizabeth became serious, those German connections were still part of the conversation surrounding the marriage. His past could not simply be erased. When Philip prepared to marry Elizabeth, he made enormous changes to his life. He surrendered his Greek and Danish royal titles, became a naturalized British subject, converted from Greek Orthodoxy to Anglicanism, and adopted the surname Mountbatten. These were not small adjustments. They represented a complete transformation of identity for a man who had already experienced years of uncertainty. In return, Philip expected to build a meaningful life beside Elizabeth. He had served in the Royal Navy and had developed a career that belonged entirely to him. But once Elizabeth became queen, that independent future changed dramatically. The wedding itself carried another painful reminder of Philip's complicated family background. Because the Second World War had ended only a short time earlier, several of his German relatives were not invited to Westminster Abbey. His mother attended, but much of his immediate family was absent. The decision may have been understandable within the political atmosphere of 1947, but understanding a decision does not necessarily remove the personal hurt caused by it. Philip entered his marriage with very little family representation around him. Instead, he was surrounded primarily by Elizabeth's enormous royal world. That imbalance would become increasingly important later, for a short period, Philip experienced something close to the independent married life he wanted. During their years in Malta, Elizabeth was able to live more normally, while Philip served with the Mediterranean fleet. He had responsibilities of his own, a naval career, and an environment where he was not simply known as the Queen's husband. Those years reportedly gave the couple a glimpse of a different future. Elizabeth could behave more freely, and Philip could continue developing his professional identity. But that chapter could not last. When King George VI died, Elizabeth's life changed instantly, and Philip's life changed with it. Elizabeth became queen in 1952, and Philip suddenly found himself standing beside the most powerful woman in Britain while losing much of the independence he had built. His naval career effectively ended. His role became supporting the monarch rather than commanding ships. Decisions about their household, public duties, and official life were increasingly controlled by an institution that had existed long before Philip arrived. He had once been an accomplished naval officer. Now his position required him to walk beside his wife, support her public role, and accept limitations that would have been unimaginable during his earlier career. Then came the issue that reportedly wounded Philip most deeply, the family surname. The traditional expectation was that children would carry their father's family name, but Elizabeth's royal position created a different problem. The royal household and government were concerned with preserving the House of Windsor. Within weeks of Elizabeth becoming queen, a formal declaration established that she and her children would continue to be known as the House and Family of Windsor. For Philip, this meant that the children he had helped bring into the world would not simply carry his surname. His identity had once again been placed behind the institution. The decision reportedly left Philip deeply frustrated. He had already given up his original royal identity, changed his religion, adopted a new surname, and abandoned the naval career he loved. Now even the family name attached to his children was being determined around him. The issue was not simply a word written on official paperwork. It represented something larger, who Philip was allowed to be inside the family he had married into. According to accounts surrounding the controversy, he privately expressed anger at being treated differently from ordinary fathers. Yet despite his frustration, he remained beside Elizabeth and continued performing his duties. The 1953 coronation provided another powerful image of Philip's unusual position. Elizabeth was crowned queen, while Philip did not receive a crown of his own. Instead, he performed a deeply symbolic role of submission and loyalty to his wife as monarch. Millions watched as he knelt before Elizabeth and pledged himself to her service. To the public, the moment represented devotion and partnership. But beneath the ceremony was a remarkable reality. Philip was a former prince, a decorated naval officer, and the husband of the sovereign, yet the institution required him to accept a position fundamentally different from hers. The surname controversy did eventually change, although not in the simple way Philip might originally have wanted. Years later, an arrangement allowed certain descendants who did not hold royal styles to use the combined surname Mountbatten-Windsor. That change finally placed Philip's family name alongside Windsor. However, it did not completely undo the earlier decision concerning his children. The significance of that distinction mattered because Charles and Anne had already grown up within the Windsor system. Philip had gained recognition for his family name, but only after years of waiting. Even then, the victory was partial rather than complete. Philip's relationship with Princess Anne offers another interesting dimension to the story. Anne eventually used the Mountbatten-Windsor surname on official documentation, giving her father's family identity a visible place in the next generation. It was a small detail compared with coronations and royal ceremonies, but for Philip, it represented something personal. Throughout his life, he had been surrounded by decisions made by others. His name, his title, his religion, his career, and even his household position had all been shaped by circumstances beyond his control. Seeing his daughter carry the family name was therefore more meaningful than it might appear. Years later, Philip also became someone who understood the difficulties faced by outsiders entering the royal family. When Diana married Charles, she entered an institution with rules and expectations that could be difficult to understand from the outside. Philip reportedly maintained correspondence with Diana during some of the most difficult periods of her marriage. Their relationship was not always simple, and he did not necessarily agree with every decision she made. But he understood what it meant to enter the royal household and discover that personal freedom could quickly disappear beneath duty. In that sense, Philip may have recognized something of his own younger self in Diana. By 2017, Philip finally stepped away from public duties at the age of 96. He moved toward a quieter life at Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate, where he could spend more time away from ceremonies, crowds, and official expectations. Some people interpreted his retirement as a final statement about the institution that had controlled so much of his life. But Princess Anne later rejected that interpretation, explaining that her father simply wanted a quieter environment where he could enjoy his remaining years. After decades of service, perhaps retirement was less about making a statement and more about finally choosing how he wanted to spend his time. Philip died in 2021 after more than 7 decades of marriage to Elizabeth. His life had included war, royal duty, family tragedy, public criticism, and extraordinary sacrifice. The surname dispute that began early in Elizabeth's reign never disappeared completely from the history of their marriage. Yet neither did the loyalty between them. Philip surrendered much of the identity he had been born with, but he remained beside Elizabeth until the end. Perhaps that is what makes the story so fascinating. Behind the ceremonies was a man constantly adapting to a world that was never originally designed around him. What do you think? Did Philip truly accept the sacrifices he made? Or did he simply learn to live with them? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more royal stories.